संसारदावा नललीडलोका त्रणाय कारुण्य घना घना त्वम् प्राप्तस्य कल्याणगुणार्णवस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् महाप्रभु कीर्तन नृत्य गीता वादित्रमाध्यान्मनसुरसेना रोमाञ्चकम्पाश्रुतरङ्गबाजो वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीविग्रहाराधननित्यनाना शृङ्गारतान्मन्दिरमजनाद युक्तश्च भक्तांश्च नियुञ्जतोऽपि वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् चतुर्विधा श्रीभगवत्प्रसाद स्वादन्न तृप्तान् हरिभक्तसङ्घम् कृत्वैव तृप्तिं भजत सदैव वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् श्रीराधिका माधवयोरपारा माधुर्यलीला गुणरूपनाम्नाम् प्रतिक्षणा स्वादनलोलुपस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् निकुञ्जयोनो रतिकेलिसीदै यायालिभिर्युक्तिरपेक्षणीया तत्रातिदाक्षादतिवल्लभस्य वन्दे गुरो श्रीचरणरविन्दम् साक्षाद्धरित्वेन समस्तशास्त्रैरुक्तस्तथा भाव्यत एव शब्दे किन्तु प्रभुर्या प्रियैव तस्य वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् यस्य प्रसादाद् भगवत्प्रसादो यस्य प्रसादात् न गति कुतोऽपि ध्यायास्तु वंस्तस्य यशस्रिसन्ध्यं वन्दे गुरु श्रीचरणारविन्दम् 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 नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने नमस्ते सरस्वती देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादिसतारिणे जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद नित्यानंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद Krishna Krishna Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha Nila Madhav, Shri Radhe. Jaya Radha Nila Madhav, Radha नीलमाधव श्री राधे जय जगन्नाथ जय बलदेवा जय सुभद्रमा जय सुदर्शन चक्र जय सीताराम 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 जय लक्ष्मण हनुमान जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय लक्ष्मी नरसिंह जय गौरनिताय 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 जय गौरनिताय जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव निताय गौर हरि बोल हरि बोल निताय गौर हरि बोल
Namaste Narasimhaya Namaste Narasimhaya Praladadaine Hiranyakashipurvakshaha Narasimha Parato Narasimha Yato Yato Yami Tato Narasimha Bahe Narasimha Hridaye Narasimha Narasimhamadem Sharanam Prapadye Tava Kara Kamalavade Nakam Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Bringa Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Jagadisha Hare Jaya Narasimha Dev Jaya Narasimha Dev Jaya Narasimha Dev Jaya Narasimha Dev Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Jaya Prahlad Maharaj Nitya Gaura Hari Bo Hari Bo Hari Bo Nitya Gaura Hari Bo
Vrindaya tulasi devaya priyaya Keshava sacha Vishnu bhakti pade devi Satyavataya namo namaha Vrindaya tulasi devaya priyaya Keshava sacha Vishnu bhakti pade devi Satyavataya namo namaha Vrindaya tulasi devaya priyaya Keshava sacha Vishnu bhakti pade devi Satyavataya namo namaha Vrinda Devi Tulasi Maharani ki jai.
कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः प्रेयसी नमो नमः राधा कृष्ण सेवा भावो ये अभिलाषी ये अभिलाषी राधा कृष्ण सेवा पाभो ये अभिलाषी जे तुम्हारा शरण लय तारा वांछा पूर्ण होय शरण लय तारा वांछा पूर्ण होय कृपा करी करो तारे वृंदावनवासी करो तारे वृंदावनवासी मोरा ये अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो वास ये अभिलाष विलास कुंजे दियो वास नयने हेरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि हेरिबो सदा युगल रूप राशि हे निवेदन दरो साकिरानुगत करो साकिरानुगत सेवाधिकार दिए करो निज दासी दीन कृष्ण दासे कोई न मोरा होय श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नवासी श्री राधा गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नवासी गोविंद प्रेमे सदा ये नवासी नमो नमः तुलसी कृष्ण प्रेयसी नमो नमः प्रेयसी नमो नमः यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे तानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिण पदे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे यानि कानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे यानि च पापानि ब्रह्महत्यादिकानि च तानि तानि प्रणश्यन्ति प्रदक्षिणपादे पदे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम राम हरे 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 कृष्णा 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 हरे हरे राम हरे राम राम हरे हरे कृष्णा कृष्णा हरे 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 राम राम हरे हरे जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय तुलसी महारानी जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी जय वृंदे देवी देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय वृंदा देवी जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद 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 जय जय प्रभुपाद जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव वृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्णभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्तवत्ताय नमो नमः वृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्णभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्तवत्ताय नमो नमः वृन्दाय तुलसीदेव्याय प्रियाय केशवस्य च कृष्णभक्तिप्रदे देवी सत्तवत्ताय नमो नमः वृंदा देवी तुलसी महारानी की जय।
Oh Tulasi, beloved of Krishna, I bow down before you again and again. My desire is to obtain the service of Shishirada and Krishna. Whoever takes shelter of you has wished fulfilled. Please grant Nitya found him to make him a resident of Vrindavana. When he resident in Prashu goes to Shiva now and now. Thus for him my vision shows before the beautiful Pancham Radha and Krishna. I beg him to make me follow card and so forth. Please give me the preach devotional service and make me own maid servant. Very fallen lotus of the Krishna tree. May I always swim the love Shish Radha and go. There are 10 offenses in the matter of chanting holy names that should be avoided, and they are as follows. 1. To blaspheme the devotees who have dedicated their lives for the propagation of the holy name of the Lord. 2. To cancel the names of demigods by Lord Shiva, Brahma, and equally independently of Lord Vishnu. 3. To disobey the order of the spiritual master. 4. To blaspheme the Vedic literature or literature names of assumed Vedic version. 5. To consider the glory of chanting Hare Krishna as imagination. 6. To give some interpretation to the holy name of the Lord. 7. To commit sinful activities on strength of chanting the holy name. 8. To consider chanting Hare Krishna one of the auspicious choose activities, offering the Vedas as fruity activities, karma, ganda. 9. To instruct a faithless person about the glory of the holy name. 10. To not complete faith in the chanting holy names and to maintain material attachments in your understanding so many instructions on this matter. It is also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. Every devotee who claims to be Vaishnava must carefully guard against these 10 offenses in order to quickly achieve desired success. Krishna Prema. Now let us have a most humble instances unto all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord. They are just as I treat who can fulfill everyone, and they are full of compassion for the fallen conditioned souls. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam Ki Jai. Jeto Darpana Marjanam Pavamahatavakni Nirvapanam Shriya Gairava Chandrika Vitaranam Vidyavatu Jivanam Anandam Buddhivardhanam Pratipadam Purnamida Sadhanam Sarvatma Snapanam Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis Tatra Pita Niyamita Smaranena Kalaha Eta Dvishi Tava Kripa Bhagavan Mamapi Durudeva Mi Disham Iha Janina Nurakaha Trinata Pi Sunichena Tarora Pi Sahishnuna Amanina Manadena Kirtanya Sadaharihi Na Tanam Na Janam Na Sundarin Kavitam Va Jagadishagamaye Mama Jammani Jammanishvare Bhavata Bhaktira Haituki Tvai Ai Nanda Tanuja Kinkaram Patitam Mam Vishame Bhavam Buddha Kripaya Tava Pada Pankaja Sthitaduri Satesham Vichintaya Nayanam Kaladasharudaraya Vatanam Katkata Rudaya Gira Pulakai Nichitam Mapur Kada Tava Nama Grahane Pati Yugaita Pravisha Itam Shunya Itam Jagat Sarvam Govinda Virahe Name Ashri Shava Padaratam Pinnashtumam Adarshanam Marmhatam Karotuva Yatha Tatava Vitatatu Lampato Mat Prana Natastu Saeva Naparaha Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam Ki Jai. Glory to the Shri Krishna Sankirtana, which cleanses the heart of all the dust accumulated for years and extinguishes fire of conditional life or repeated birth and death. This Sankirtan movement is the prime benediction for humanity in the large because it spreads the rays and benediction moon. It is the life of all transcendental knowledge. It increases ocean transcendent bliss and enables to fully taste the nectar for which all weak anxious. O my Lord, your holy name alone grants all beneficent human beings. Thus you have hundreds of millions of names like Krishna and Govinda. In these transcendent names have vested all your transcendental energies. There are not even hard and fast rules for chanting these names. O my Lord, out of kindness enables easily approached by holy names but I'm so unfortunate I have no attraction for them. One should chant the holy name of the Lord in humble state of mind, thinking himself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respect to others. Chant her name constantly. O Almighty Lord, I have no desire to accumulate wealth, nor do I desire beautiful women, nor do I want any number of followers. I only want your causeless devotional service, birth after birth. O Son Marginanda, I'm your eternal servitor, yet somehow I fall into this ocean of birth and death. Please pick me up from the ocean of death, and place me as one of Adam to the lotus feet. O my Lord, while my eyes be decked with tears of love flowing constantly when I chant the holy name, while my voice choke up, or hair on my body stand and a recitation of your name. O Govinda, feeling on separation, I'm considered the moment to be like a great millennium. Tears are flowing from eyes like torrents of rain, and I'm feeling all vacant in the world in your absence. I know no one but Krishna as my Lord, and shall remain so if he handles me roughly by his embrace, or makes me broken-hearted by not being present before me. He is completely free to do anything and everything, for he is always my worshipable Lord, unconditionally. Shri Chaitanya Shikshastakam Ki Jai. Shri Guru Pranam and Mangala Charanam prayer Ki Jai. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshomritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamahyam Dadati Sapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurung Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Sarasate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pachata Desha Tarine Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Iti Namine Shri Varshabhanavi Devi Daitaya Kripaptaye Krishna Sambandha Vijnana Daine Prabhavin Namaha Madhuryo Jala Premadya Shri Rupa Nuka Bhaktida Shri Gaura Karana Shakti Vigrahaya Namostate Namaste Gauravani Shri Murtaye Dinatarine Rupa Nuka Viruddha Siddhanta Dvanta Harine Namo Gaura Kishoraya Sashad Vairagya Murtaye Vipalambara Sambodhe Padam Bojate Namaha Namo Bhakti Vinodaya Sachidananda Namine Gaura Shakti Swarupaya Rupa Nuka Varayate Gauravir Bhava Bhumistvam Nirdeshta Sajana Priya Vaishnava Sava Bhama Shri Jagannathaya Te Namaha Vancha Kalpatarudisha Kripa Sindhu Devata Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Padayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gaurateshe Namaha Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Swarupakam Bhaktavataram Bhaktakham Namami Bhakta Shaktikam Hey Krishna Karna Sindho Dinabanto Jagapate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate Jayatam Surato Pangor Mamamanda Materikati Masarvasva Padam Bojo Radha Madana Mohano Divya Vindaranya Kalpaju Madaha Shimadarana Gara Singhasanasto Shimadarada Shila Govinda Devo Pishtari Bi Seva Mano Smarami Shriman Rasarasaram Divam Siva Tatatastita Karsham Vinusuner Gopir Gopinata Shri Yesuna Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sate Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Dadha Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare.
Shri Brahma Samhita Ki Jai. Ishvara Parama Krishna Sachitananda Vigraha Radhe Radhe Govinda Sarvakarana Karana Shantamani Prakarasatma Sukalpa Vriksha Laksha Vridhe Susurabhi Ravipalayantam Lakshmi Sahasrasata Sambrahma Sevyamanam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Kvanantam Aravinda Dalaya Taksham Bharhavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Kandar Prakoti Niya Yesasovam Vadi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Alola Chandrakala Sadvanamalya Vamsi Ratnam Gudam Pranaya Keli Kalavilasam Shamam Tribanga Lalita Nita Prakasam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Angani Yasya Sakalendriya Vrittimanti Pasyanti Panti Kalyanti Chiram Jaganti Ananda Chinmaya Sadujvala Vikrahasya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Advaitam Achyutam Anadim Ananta Rupam Adyam Purana Purusham Navayovanam Cha Vedesa Durlabam Adurlabam Atma Bhakto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Pantastakoti Satavatsara Sampragamyo Vayora Tapi Manaso Munipungamana So Pyastiyat Prapadasim Yavichintya Tatve Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Eko Pyasora Chaitam Jagadanda Gotim Yas Chakti Rasti Jagadanda Jayayadanta Andantarasta Paramanu Chayantarastam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Yat Bhava Bhavita Dio Manajasta Taiva Samprapya Rupa Mahima Sanayanabusa Suktaryam Evan Nikama Pratitaistavanti Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ananda Chinmaya Rasa Pratibhavita Bhista Bhirya Eva Nityarupa Taya Kalabi Koloka Eva Nimisata Kilatma Bhuto Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochanena Santaksadeva Hidesa Vilokayanti Yam Shama Sundaram Chintya Gunaswarupam Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami Ramadi Murti Sukala Nimenatista Nana Avatara Makarod Bhuvane Sakintu Krishna Swayam Sambhavat Paramankulamya Govindam Adi Purusham Tamaham Bhajami. Krishna, who is known as Govinda, is the Supreme Godhead. He has an eternal blissful spiritual body. He is the origin of all. He has no other origin, and he is the prime cause of all causes. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, the first progenitor who is tending the cows, yielding all desires, in abodes built with spiritual gems, surrounded by millions of purpose trees, always served with great reverence and affection by hundreds and thousands of Lakshmis or Gopis. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is adept in playing on his flute, with blooming eyes like lotus petals, with head decked with peacock's feather, with the figure of beauty tinged with the hue of blue clouds, and his unique loveliness charming millions of cupids. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, round whose neck is swinging a garland of flowers beautified with the moon locket, whose two hands are adorned with the flute and jeweled ornaments, who always revels in pastimes of love, whose graceful threefold bending form of Sham Sundar is eternally manifest. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, whose transcendental form is full of bliss, truth, substantiality, and is thus full of the most dazzling splendor. Each of the limbs of that transcendental figure possesses in himself the full-fledged functions of all the organs, and eternally sees, maintains, and manifests the infinite universes, both spiritual and mundane. I worship Govinda, I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is inaccessible to the Vedas, but obtainable by pure, unalloyed devotion of the soul, who is without a second, who is not subject to decay, is without a beginning, whose form is endless, who is the beginning and the eternal Purusha. Yet he is a person possessing the beauty of blooming youth. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, only the tip of the toe of whose lotus feet is approached by the yogis who aspire after the transcendental and betake themselves to pranayama by drilling the respiration, or by the jnanis who try to find out the non-differentiated Brahman by the process of elimination of the mundane extending over thousands of millions of years. He is an undifferentiated entity, as there is no distinction between the potency and the possessor thereof. In his work of creation of millions of worlds, his potency remains inseparable. All the universes exist in him, and he is present in his fullness in every one of the atoms that are scattered throughout the universe at one and the same time. Such is the primeval Lord, whom I adore. I adore the same Govinda, the primeval Lord, in whose praise men who are imbued with devotion sing the mantra suktas told by the Vedas by gaining their appropriate beauty, greatness, thrones, conveyances, and ornaments. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, residing in his own realm, Goloka, with Radha, and resembling his own spiritual figure, the embodiment of the ecstatic potency possessed of the 64 artistic activities, in the company of her confidants, Sakis, embodiments of the extensions of her bodily form, permeated and vitalized by his ever-blissful spiritual rasa. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who is Sham Sundara, Krishna himself, with inconceivable and innumerable attributes, whom the pure devotees see in their heart of hearts, with the eye of devotion tinged with the salve of love. I worship Govinda, the primeval Lord, who manifests himself personally as Krishna, and the different avatars in the world in the form of Rama, Nrsimha, Vamana, etc., as his subjective portions. Go Pranam Nandi Haribol. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavatam Grantaraj Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasaya Bhutali Simate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Tinamani. Namaste Saraswati Deve Guruvani Pacharine Nirvisesa Sunyavari Paskati Desatarni. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Guru Bhakti Vrindam. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare. Srimad Bhagavatam chapter 15. And we're finishing up verse number 1 and going forward. Now, there are many major points in verse number 1. So we'll do a quick summary and then go forward. And it says, the Supreme Personality of Godhead said, it is said that there is an imperishable banyan tree that has its roots upward and its branches down, and whose leaves are the Vedic hymns. One who knows this tree is the knower of the Vedas. Okay. So, in the purport it says, after the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, that took place in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And when it says, after the discussion of the importance of Bhakti Yoga, one may question, what about the Vedas? It is explained in this chapter that the purpose of the Vedic study is to understand Krishna. Okay, so that's number one big point. The purpose of the Vedic study, or the Vedic literature, is to understand Krishna. Vedaishta sarvirham eva vidya. 15th chapter, 15th verse, the third line says that, and I am to be known by all the Vedas. Therefore, one who is Krishna conscious, who is engaged in devotional service, already knows the Vedas. So, if you are engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day, by dovetailing all your activities into Krishna's service, you have understood the Vedas. Because that's the main purpose of the Vedas, is to convince us to be engaged full-time in devotional service, where we lose all our attachment to the material world and become completely attached to Radha and Krishna. So that's point number 1. Then point number 2, the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who is engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. So when Prabhupada first met his spiritual master in 1922, it was a short meeting, and when he was able to speak to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, in the first 30 seconds, 1 minute, when Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur saw Prabhupada, he said, "You're a young man, you're well educated. You should spread this movement in the Western world, in English." And Prabhupada said, "Well, nobody will listen to me because we are a conquered nation." Because he was a follower of Gandhi at that time. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, "That's not a fact." He said, "This politics will never end. Therefore, you should not be involved in it, because as soon as you think you've solved the problem, more problems come." And that's exactly what happened. Gandhi and the Subhash Chandra Bose and so forth, it was mainly Subhash Chandra Bose, got rid of the British. The British leave India, and right away there's a gigantic split between the Muslims and the Hindus, and they break away and start their own country, Pakistan and Bangladesh. And almost 1 million Hindus were killed or murdered, and some Muslims also. And people had to leave their ancestral lands, and so many Indians had to leave Pakistan, what became Pakistan. And many Muslims also had to leave India. So it just created havoc. It didn't solve any problems, it just gave a new set of problems. So the British leave, and all of a sudden there's partition, so many people die, and their people's lives are uprooted. It was a mess. And then, because that happened due to the weakness of Gandhi, Gandhi is assassinated, although he's preaching nonviolence. That was another major shock. Actually, Nehru was happy because he took over the country and then reoriented it in the complete wrong direction. If Gandhi was not killed, he would have insisted that they decentralize all the big cities. People move back to the villages. But no, that was not Nehru's strategy. Nehru was to industrialize the country and get people from all the villages to come and work in the factories. So we see they get rid of the British, and they have even worse problems now. So many people die, there's wars, and then there's not just one war, there's been 3 major wars between Pakistan and India. And each time many people died. So we see Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati's retort to Prabhupada was, your politics will never end. You get rid of one set of problems, and a whole new set of problems will come immediately. That's the nature of material world. Therefore, you shouldn't waste your time in politics, because politics is the process of making friends and enemies. Just like we see here in America. Republicans, bad. Democrats, good. And on the other side, Democrats, bad. Republicans, good. This is just going on. It's never going to end. See, and it's because politics divides people. It doesn't bring them together. Because you always have to have a friend and an enemy when there's politics. It's like one time Prabhupada said, and now politics has entered into our ISKCON. Why? Because the devotees were arguing all the time, fighting at one point. When the movement started to get more, let's say, successful, everyone got, wanted their own office and their own. At that time, there was no computers. They wanted their own Rolex watch, and they wanted this, and they wanted that, and it just created a lot of competition, and politics. People are always fighting. I mean, when I say people, the devotees were always fighting. Right? And Prabhupada finally said, look, the Americans, they're very expert at fighting and being attached to illicit sex. So that was not a good statement about the state of the devotees. Well, because whenever there's money and power, there's also corruption. So unless we strictly follow the four regulative principles and chant our rounds and do everything recommended for a devotee to do, such as eating only prasadam, regularly coming to the morning program and also the evening program, and going on Sankirtan, preaching, worshiping the deities, and so forth, doing all these things, then one can overcome these bad habits. But when one becomes attached to the position, to being honored, they develop a false ego, there's fighting, then there's no difference between the karmis and the devotees at that point. They're all doing the same thing, engaged in illicit sex and fighting and changing things. That's another thing Prabhupada said. Americans love to change things. Right? So you see, there were a lot of growing pains in ISKCON that Prabhupada had to deal with. Are all those things gone now? Not completely. They keep coming back every generation. But we have to deconstruct this banyan tree of illusion. Individually, we have to do it. Then we become peaceful, and we cooperate, and we're not troubled by dualities. So this is what's being explained in this first verse and the purport. It says, the entanglement of this material world is compared here to a banyan tree. For one who has engaged in fruitive activities, there is no end to the banyan tree. He wanders from one branch to another, to another, to another. The tree of this material world has no end. And for one who is attached to this tree, there is no possibility of liberation. The Vedic hymns meant for elevating oneself are called the leaves of this tree. This tree's roots grow upward because they begin from where Brahma is located, the topmost planet of the universe. It is, if one can understand this indestructible tree of illusion, then one can get out of it. So when it says indestructible tree, it's indestructible for the karmis. But devotees can turn their back to it, not be attracted to it anymore. And in that way, they become free of the illusory banyan tree. So let's read on now. This process of extrication, meaning getting free, should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement. And up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Right. Yeah. So, therefore, it says in the end of the 6th chapter, Yoginam apisarvesam mad gatanantaratmana Shraddhavam bhajate yomam same yuktatamo matak. So, it's a very important verse. After 6 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita, right at the end, Krishna says, and of all yogis, the one with great faith, who always abides in me, thinks of me within himself, and renders transcendental loving service to me. He is the most intimately united with me in yoga, and is the highest of all yogis. That is my opinion. So, that is the conclusion of Krishna's thought, and his opinion, so that means it's final, that the Bhakti Yogi is the highest of all yogis. Now, this process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement, and up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. There you go. So, if we stay attached to material things, material endeavors, material thoughts, material culture, it's very difficult to make tangible spiritual progress. But if we lose our attachment to the material world and we transfer our attachment to Krishna, then it's very easy to be free and to deconstruct the illusory banyan tree from our mind. It's all going on in the mind, see. So it says the process of extrication should be understood. In the previous chapters, it has been explained that there are many processes by which to get out of the material entanglement, and up to the 13th chapter, we have seen that devotional service to the Supreme Lord is the best way. Now, the basic principle of devotional service is detachment from material activities and attachment to the transcendental service of the Lord. The process of breaking attachment to the material world is discussed in the beginning of this chapter. So this is the beginning, it's the first verse. The root of this material existence grows upward. This means that it begins from the total material substance, or the Mahat Tattva, from the topmost planet of the universe. From there, the whole universe is expanded, with so many branches representing the various planetary systems. The fruits represent the results of the living entity's activities, namely religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, or dharma, artha, kama, moksha. So these are the fruits which represent the results of the living entity's activities. Now, there is no ready experience in the world of a tree situated with its branches down and its roots upward, but there is such a thing. That tree can be found beside a reservoir of water, meaning like a river or a pond. We can see that the trees on the bank reflect upon the water with their branches down and roots up. At least it looks like that. In other words, the tree of this material world is only a reflection of the real tree of the spiritual world. This reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire. Now, the reflection of the tree is situated on the pond or the river. But the reflection of reality, or the illusory banyan tree, is situated on desire. Everything depends on what our desires are. The way we see the world, the way we live, the way we talk, everything's going to be determined by what our desires are. So it's very easy to hide our desires because they're private thoughts. So we can be acting in one way but thinking in another way. But when we're acting in Krishna consciousness and always thinking about Krishna, then we're on the fast track of liberation from the false, illusory banyan tree. So therefore it says, this reflection of the spiritual world is situated on desire, just as a tree's reflection is situated on water. Desire is the cause of things being situated in the reflected material light. In other words, in the illusion of the banyan, upside down banyan tree. One who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. Now, although the illusory banyan tree is indestructible, it's possible to lose our attraction to it and transfer all our thoughts and everything to Krishna. So that is the process. Even though the banyan tree is indestructible, but it is possible to free ourselves from it. How is that? Regular hearing and chanting. You don't get purified by watching a movie. You don't get purified like even if you go traveling around, even if you go on parikramas, although that's good, but what purifies us significantly is this hearing and chanting and then repeating. That's what actually purifies a person. And that's been explained already in previous chapters, in the 13th chapter. So it says, one who wants to get out of this material existence must know this tree thoroughly through analytical study. Then he can cut off his relationship with it. So the first 4 verses of the 15th chapter is this analytical study of the upside-down banyan tree that is illusory in the material world. Now, just like we studied how to see things properly in the 13th chapter, now we're going even deeper, and it's how to see and correctly this illusory tree, a banyan tree, or this tree of illusion, and lose our attraction to it, and transfer our attraction to Krishna and what is Sat, or eternal. This tree, being the reflection of the real tree, is an exact replica. Everything is there in the spiritual world. The impersonalists take Brahman to be the root of this material tree, and from the root, according to Sankhya philosophy, come Prakriti and Purusha. Then the 3 gunas, then the 5 gross elements, Panchamahabhuta, then the 10 senses, Dasendriya, mind, etc. In this way, they divide up the whole material world into 24 elements. If Brahman is the center of all manifestations, then this material world is a manifestation of the center by 180 degrees, and the other 180 degrees constitute the spiritual world. So in other words, the lower part of this circle is the material world, and the upper part is the spiritual world. That's basically what it's saying. The material world is the perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. So in other words, when you have a perverted reflection, it means it's upside down. And it's just a reflection. It's not the real substance. The real substance is in the spiritual world. But we get tricked, and we think the real substance is in the material world, and that there's no spiritual world. So we see how everything is upside down. Everything is confused in the material world. Now, to purify all that confusion, it takes a lot of hearing and repeating, or Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, a lot. I mean, a lifetime of it. So we see every day Prabhupada was giving lectures. That's why we have thousands and thousands of lectures to Srila Prabhupada, right? He was teaching all the time this Bhagavad Gita and Srimad Bhagavatam. He translated Bhagavad Gita. He translated Srimad Bhagavatam so that we can understand who is Krishna, what is the spiritual world, and what is the real nature of this illusory material world, and how to become free from it. It takes a long time to understand this because we've been in the material world for so many lifetimes that there's a huge baggage that we're carrying of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Actually, I made a nice list here. It says these are the fours. First, birth, old age, disease, death. Then, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. Then, dharma, artha, kama, moksha, or religiosity, economic development, sense gratification, and desire and hatred. Then chant Hare Krishna, eat prasadam, hear Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, go to the temple, and associate with devotees and engage in devotional service. And then Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Sudra, then Brahmacharya, Grihastha, Vanaprastha, Sannyas, and then Pranay, Artha, Diya, Vacha, or you should use one's life, wealth, intelligence, and words in Krishna's service. These are the fours. There's also the threes. There's the twos. There's the one. There's the five. There's the 8. There's the 10. See? But these are the fours. So if you learn the first 3, birth, death, old age, disease, and death, okay, everybody knows that. Eating, sleeping, mating, defending, okay, that's all material life. And then dharma, artha, kama, moksha, or religiosity and material development, or sense gratification and liberation. These are activities of the material world. Now, the first 2 are gross activities that keeps us in the material world. The third one, the dharma, artha, kama, moksha, if it's done under the direction of bona fide gurus, it's a stepping stone to go up to transcendental life. If it's done in the association of materialistic brahmanas, it's material world still. So you see, the pivotal thing is the varnashram system. It's meant to elevate people, but it also can be falsely followed due to being directed by materialistic brahmanas. Just like there's this one person in India, although he's a Vaishnava, but he always says, Manava Seva is Madhava Seva. So he has one disciple here. One time I explained to him in a nice way that his guru was making a mistake. It's Madhava Seva is Manava Seva. So every time this guy comes to the temple and does a puja here, he always says, and there's Madhava Seva is Madhava Seva. Although his guru is saying Madhava Seva is Madhava Seva. So when he comes here, he says that. When he's outside, he says Madhava Seva is Madhava Seva. Right? So this is all nonsense, of course. But anyway, that's the reality today. Okay, so the Varnashram system, the Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha, can be done by the ritualistic brahmanas, and you don't actually make spiritual advancement. You make some, little bit of spiritual advancement, but it doesn't work because you're being taught by a person who has material desires. You have to be taught by someone who doesn't have material desires, only desires to please Krishna. So it's possible to seemingly follow the Varnashram system and not really make tangible progress. But in the company of genuine brahmanas and genuine devotees, and the position of a devotee is superior to the position of a brahmana. But in any case, devotees act as brahmanas, but not for making money, but for helping people make spiritual advancement. So if one is following the Varnashram system correctly, because they have a bona fide guru or gurus, then they make tangible progress, and they can come to the higher swadharma, or pure devotional service. Right? Dharma means your occupational duty. Occupational duty, how you earn a living, how you live, the culture that you follow, and so forth. So there's the lower swadharma and the higher swadharma. Lower swadharma is while you're still attached to the material world, you follow the principles of dharma, artha, kama, moksha, and you make gradual advancement. When you actually advance and are fully Krishna conscious, then you're practicing the higher swadharma, or pure devotional service, as your real occupational duty. Whereas before that, it's mixed. It's some occupational duties for material maintenance, and there's occupational duties for spiritual advancement. So it's sort of mixed together. But when you become completely convinced of Krishna consciousness, then there's only your occupational duty is pure devotional service. So what does it mean? Occupational duty is something you must do every day in your life. So when one becomes purified, they must go to sleep early, wake up early, chant their rounds, come to the temple, for the morning program, work honestly during the day, maybe come to the program in the evening. In other words, they're fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, and they're still working, they still maintain their family, but they're regulated. So that's the difference between someone who's advanced spiritually and someone who's not so advanced. Someone who's advanced spiritually is strictly regulated. In fact, you can tell the time of day by what they're doing. So, yeah, they're up 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, and taking a bath or a shower, and then putting on clean clothes, putting on tilak, and chanting some rounds, come to the temple. You see, you can. There's predictability by the regularity of the devotee. You know exactly what the devotee is doing at different times of the day without even seeing them, because that's what they do. They're very regulated. And the so-so devotees, they're not so regulated. And the non-devotees, they're not regulated at all. Or they're regulated for sense gratification, eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. So everything depends on our desires. So when we lose our desires for sense gratification, and we only desire to please Krishna, at that point, even though we're in this body, even though we're in the material world, we're actually liberated. Because we're no longer attracted to the false upside-down banyan tree. Okay, so that's what we're aiming for. So, therefore it says, the material world is the perverted reflection, so the spiritual world must have the same variegatedness, but in reality. The Prakriti is the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the Purusha is the Supreme Lord himself, and that is explained in Bhagavad Gita. Since this manifestation is material, it is temporary. A reflection is temporary, for it is sometimes seen and sometimes not seen. But the origin from whence is an old English word, from where the reflection is reflected, is eternal. The material reflection of the real tree has to be cut off. When it is said that a person knows the Vedas, it is assumed that he knows how to cut off attachment to this material world. If one knows that process, he actually knows the Vedas. One who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. Those are the hymns, those are the mantras that we're saying. And the supreme mantra is Hare Krishna Mahamantra. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas okay, one who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. So he might be reciting these mantras, right? That's good, but he might not really know the meaning of the mantras fully, right? So he does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas. The purpose of the Vedas, as disclosed by the personality of Godhead himself, is to cut down this reflected tree and attain the real tree of the spiritual world. So, when one is fully engaged in Krishna consciousness, they have understood the tree of illusion, or the banyan upside down tree of illusion, and they're not attracted to it anymore. They don't compromise their time, a little bit of sense gratification, a little bit of Krishna consciousness. There's all Krishna consciousness and no sense gratification. But yet the senses are satisfied by taking prasadam, hearing and chanting, going on Sankirtan, doing this, doing that, engaging in deity worship. So one is still satisfied, but not by gross sense gratification, but by devotional service, where there's no mundane sense gratification. But transcendental senses are being now manifested because the dark cloud or hazy cloud of sense gratification has gone away. So when you get engaged in sense gratification, you have a confused mind. It's not clear. It's not steady. So therefore, you can't remain regulated. But as soon as the mind becomes completely dedicated to Krishna, you become steady. And people can predict what you're doing at different times of the day because you're strictly following Krishna consciousness. Okay, so that's the first verse. It's very profound, has a lot of points in it. And it's to help us understand what is the real purpose of the Vedas. That is to be completely engaged in devotional service and go back to Godhead. Okay, so now the second text. The branches of this tree extend downward and upward, nourished by the three modes of material nature. The twigs are the objects of the senses. This tree also has roots going down, and these are bound to the fruitive actions of human society. So look, you can't figure out whether the roots are going up or down. Right? It's just like a banyan tree. Banyan tree has one trunk, then it grows these branches, but the branches grow down, and then they develop roots, and now it looks as if there's two banyan trees or three banyan trees. You can't tell which is the original root, banyan tree. It looks like there's a whole forest of banyan trees, but actually there's only one banyan tree. You see, so that's what's happening with this upside down banyan tree. You can't really tell where the roots are, where the which are branches, which are the trunk. They all look alike, right? And you get lost in this maze of branches that have roots. So it's growing upwards and it's growing downwards also. So that's a banyan tree, right? It's going up and down. So the branches seem to go down, and then they expand some roots, and now it looks like a trunk of a tree. So it's confusing. And it says that the description of banyan tree is further explained here. Its branches spread in all directions. In the lower parts, there are variegated manifestations of living entities, human beings, animals, horses, cows, dogs, cats, etc. These are situated on the lower parts of the branches, whereas on the upper parts are higher forms of living entities, the demigods, Gandharvas. Now, there are so many different types of demigods. Right? Just like there's so many different types of species, human beings, animals, so forth. There's so many different types of demigods also, all different levels of consciousness. As a tree is nourished by water, so this tree is nourished by the three modes of material nature. So what does it mean, nourished by? So we see, now, there's a young boy, he goes to school, and when he gets to be a teenager, another boy tells him, oh, if you want to be part of our group, you have to smoke a cigarette. You have to learn to smoke a cigarette. We all smoke. And he said, well, what's a cigarette? And then they show him what a cigarette is. And then they teach him how to smoke. Now, at the beginning, he starts coughing, tears come from his eyes, and feels like he's choking. But to be part of the group, he's got to learn how to smoke. So eventually he learns to smoke, and now pretty soon he's inhaling a lot of smoke, and he's blowing it out of his mouth, and it's real cool, right? So this is what's happening factually in the material world, whether it's learning to smoke, or learning to engage in illicit sex, or learning to take intoxication, or learning to gamble. I remember at one point, a lot of my friends, they started gambling. We played poker, and and they spend hours just gambling for 50 cents or $1 or $5 or $10, right? And we were basically imitating our fathers, because the fathers were gambling, but it wasn't for 25 cents or 50 cents. It was like hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars, and they would go on sometimes 3 days in a row, because the kids would be with them, and then they would say, "Go get me a Coke," so you have to get them to bring a Coke, and go do this, go do that. So we would be there watching them gamble all day long and all night long. Of course, we would fall asleep, but they wouldn't fall asleep. Sometimes they'd be gambling 3 days in a row on weekends. So this is crazy stuff, right? But we didn't know. We were just kids, and we were just following what they're showing us to do. So we developed the same bad habits. I hope you don't have any bad association like that. Okay, so we'll stop right there now. Are there any questions? Because this is all, you can see how complicated this is. You're entangled by the banyan tree of the microphone.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Yes.
So this is very interesting verse. But when we say, Maharaj, this is the perverted reflection, just for curiosity, right?
Meaning it's upside down.
Yeah, upside down, or maybe replica. Is it replica of? We say that it's whatever we have in spiritual world is here. So Vrindavan is one, right? So
Now, what you see here is a corrupted thing.
yeah.
It looks the same, but it's corrupted, and it's not real. In fact, it's not eternal.
Yeah.
It has some reality, but it's not eternal. Okay, go ahead.
But yeah, how do you understand? Because Vrindavan is one. So are we saying that just this Earth globe is just only the one?
Other what?
Earth, our planet, Earth planet.
Yes.
Is that the only?
It's not Earth. It's
Earth.
Earth.
Yeah, Earth.
If you say Earth, nobody understands what you're saying. Go ahead.
Okay. So is that the only? I mean, can you see that as a reflection of the spiritual world, or the whole material world is the reflection of spiritual world? If the whole material world is the reflection of spiritual world, then the Vrindavan is only on Earth, or Vrindavan is all in all the planets, or only on the Earth?
Okay. Well, there is Vrindavan on the earth. You've visited it already,
Yeah.
right? So that's non-different than the Vrindavan. It's called Gokula, and Vrindavan in the spiritual world is called Goloka. So you have a facsimile of Vrindavan here on the earth. Now, whether you see it correctly or not, that's another question.
Yeah, but then that means that our planet is that planet of Goloka. Is it resembling to Goloka, and other planets in this material world are some other planets? Reflection of some other in the spiritual world. That's what I'm saying. I mean, it's
When you go to
trying to understand.
When you go to Vrindavan in India, right, it is an expansion of the spiritual world. In that particular area, there's Vrindavan, there's Varsana, and all those places. That's all part of this spiritual facsimile of what's in the spiritual world. That's special. It's not like, there's a Vrindavan in Seattle. There's a temple in Seattle, right? Inside the temple, it's like Vaikuntha. But the real, expansion in the spiritual material world of Vrindavan is in India. Now, there's another point. Advaitacharya said to Lord Chaitanya, wherever you are, that is Vrindavan. So a pure devotee like Prabhupada can create Vrindavan anywhere on the earth. That's what Prabhupada did. He went around, established new Vrindavan, established new Mathura, new this, new that. If people follow all the regulative principles, it's not non-different than Vrindavan. So the material world is made of material energy, but Krishna knows how to make material energy into spiritual energy, or spiritual energy into material energy. He has that power. Now, a pure devotee also has partially that power. A pure devotee can go anywhere and create Vrindavan, which is what Prabhupada did, which is what Lord Chaitanya did. But the main thing is that when you go to India, to Vrindavan, whether you realize it or not, you're in an area where the spiritual world is manifest, because Lord Chaitanya came, Krishna himself came, and showed that there's no difference between the Vrindavan and the material world and Vrindavan and the spiritual world. Now, you might not see it correctly, because if you spend all your time in Lohi Bazaar trying to buy things, and you don't exactly see, whereas if you're in the Krishna Balaram temple, there's 24-hour kirtan going on, right? And there's a lot of dancing and joy, spiritual joy, and there's classes going on, there's festivals going on. So now you understand there's a difference between, let's say you go down to downtown Seattle, it doesn't look like Vrindavan there, because most people are just engaged in sense gratification. But if you come to the temple, well, what do you see? You see festivals going on, you see deity worship going on, you see prasadam being distributed. And so, therefore, this is like a little oasis, a little Vrindavan. So Vrindavan is a place where people are worshipping Radha and Krishna 24 hours a day. And they're always hearing and chanting and preaching. So now we see that when you lose your attraction to the inverted or perverted expansion of the banyan tree, and you develop attraction for Krishna, you get free of the banyan tree, even though it's indestructible, but you're no longer attached to it. You lose your taste for it completely. Just like you might develop a taste for smoking. It's something that you learn to do. But after you get your lung cancer, then you realize you made a big mistake. And then you realize you should have never even started getting attached to smoking, because it's self-destructive. And Krishna says, no intoxication. So if we follow Krishna's instructions, we don't have any problems in life. And we become attached to Krishna, which is a culture. So in that culture, there's no meat eating, there's no gambling, there's no illicit sex, there's no intoxication. But there is chanting, dancing, and feasting. So, and you learn these things by association. You learn to smoke by association, and you learn to be Krishna conscious by association. So you have to make a decision who you're going to associate with. So those are decisions that you have to make. You have to decide. So you can have a completely spiritual life in this material world, and you can be completely in Maya in the spiritual world, in the material world. You can go either way. That's why we're marginal. We can go either way. So we're trying to convince you in the temple to always stay on Krishna's side. That's what we're doing. And to learn more and more about Krishna. There's no end to how much you can learn about Krishna, because he's the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Okay. So we'll stop right there. Thank you. Hare Krishna. Of course, Srila Prabhupada. Yeah, what is your question?
Hare Krishna Maharaj, when it says in the
Purport.
in the purport, right before text to
Extrication.
yeah, it says according to Sangika philosophy, kam prakrit purusana purusa, then the three gunas. I don't understand that part, but I do understand prakrit is the power of Krishna, and purusa is the actual Krishna. But what is the power? What is prakriti?
Prakriti means material nature.
Okay.
Earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, false ego. And so that's your question. What is the Prakriti? It's the material nature, as opposed to the spiritual nature.
Yeah, and I also don't understand the sentence.
The control of the three modes
Yeah.
that nourish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the three modes are goodness, passion, and ignorance.
Okay.
So all three modes are supernatural forces that control the activities of living entities, meaning you and me.
It's the three modes. Because I got confused. It said gunas.
A guna means modes
Oh.
or qualities.
Okay.
So these three qualities are controlling the way we act. Right? Now, you can be free of these three qualities by first coming to the mode of goodness and giving up passion and ignorance, and staying in the mode of goodness, and by hearing and chanting and associating with devotees, then you can attain transcendental goodness, where you're actually free of the influence of the three modes. So you're no longer attracted to material things. You're only attracted to service of Krishna. Okay?
Maharaj, the gunas decide the actions. Is thought also an action by the gunas?
Thought?
The thought that arises.
There's three psychological steps: thinking, feeling, and willing. Then you act. So you have to go through those three psychological steps in order to act. So this, like, I know this one man, he was studying this one stock for like 2 years. And he was thinking about it, feeling that, if he bought it, it would be good. And then he decided, I must do it. He bought the stock, right? He was convinced after 2 years of study of that stock. And then about 2 weeks after he bought it, the whole stock collapsed. He lost everything. He lost like $2 million. So, yeah, there's 3 psychological steps before you act. There's thinking, then feeling how good it would be if you did this, and then becoming convinced, I must do it, otherwise I'll never be happy. And then you do it. Okay.
So thinking is not a guna's action.
No, thinking is the beginning of it.
Okay.
But you haven't performed the action yet. But you're considering it. Then you think about how good it would feel if you did it. And then you're convinced, if I don't do this, I'll never be happy. And then you do it. Okay, so these are 3 psychological steps. And that's where Krishna consciousness comes in. It can act on the thinking, feeling, and willing and stop you from doing things. Because there are 5 factors to every action. And the 5th factor is Krishna. So ultimately, when you become Krishna conscious, you'll say, well, I would like to buy a Tesla, and I'm attracted to it, and I want to do it. But then you think, but will Krishna be pleased if I buy a Tesla? And then you think, well, I already have a car, it works. So it takes me from point A to point B. I don't have much problem with this car. So why would I want to buy a Tesla now? Because my neighbor bought a Tesla, and that guy's an idiot. And if he's an idiot and he has a Tesla, that means I must be a bigger idiot because I don't have a Tesla. So I'm going to buy a Tesla. So now you say, well, but that's not going to please Krishna, though. So you decide not to. So Krishna consciousness acts on the level of thinking, feeling, and willing. It can stop you from making mistakes. But if you're not Krishna conscious, then you'll make plenty of mistakes. You can't control yourself. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
All right, Haribol.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, I have a question. So you said Madhava Seva is not Madhava Seva, but is Vaishnava Seva equal to Madhava Seva?
Well, Madhava Seva is Krishna consciousness. Madhava is the name of Krishna. So if you engage in serving Krishna, then you also serve humanity, but in a meaningful way. But if you just serve humanity, you're not necessarily serving Krishna. Just like humanity says, we want turkey for Thanksgiving. Well, if you give them turkey on Thanksgiving, how are you serving Krishna? You're not serving Krishna. You're just serving their whims. Right? Okay. So Madhava is the name of Krishna. So instead of saying Madhava, you say Krishna Seva. So if you serve Krishna, you're going to serve everyone. Just like we go and serve prasadam to people. But we're not just serving food, we're serving prasadam. If it's just food, then it's a mundane thing. But it's prasadam. And we also have some literature, if they want it. And we also have encouraging them to chant Hare Krishna. So that's different than just serving food. Okay, Haribol. You have a question? Okay. That's all right, go ahead.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. In the first text of last paragraph, one who is attracted by the ritualistic formulas of the Vedas is attracted by the beautiful green leaves of the tree. He or she does not exactly know the purpose of the Vedas.
Yeah, so whenever you have all these mantras being said and pujas being done, just like the other day, at Sunday night lecture, I asked the people, I said, do you understand all the Sanskrit mantras that the Pandit is saying when they do, let's say, the different pujas that they do? And most people said no. You know, one person said, well, sometimes the Pandit may explain. You know, I said, all the Pandits? They said, no, not all the Pandits explain. Some of them sometimes explain. I said, do you remember any of those explanations? They said, well, I remember something. But you see, they don't really understand what's being said. You know, he can say, you know, you're all going to go to hell. You know, you don't know. if he says it in Sanskrit, you don't know what he said, you know. So you don't really learn that much by ritualistic performances. They're not bad.
True.
But how much do people actually understand? That's the question.
I think that is 80 to 90% of what India is. Like, we
Yeah.
have been grown up doing stuff, but not knowing why we are doing. But just regarding that, in my own family, I see a lot of my relatives doing Vishnu Sahasranamam, Lakshmi Sahasranamam. They just do it. Like, they know all of it by heart, which is great. But how can I educate them that that's
Not enough.
that's not enough? Because that's where it becomes
Well, if
very
you ask
delicate.
questions, you say to your mother or grandmother, they're pious people, no doubt about it, and they're not breaking any of the rules and regulations, But because they're just doing it and not really understanding, they're practicing the meaning of it, but they might not be able to teach somebody else. So that means that they're failing because they can't pass it on to the next generation. Now, if they do, they can train their kids to do the same thing, just repeat the mantras without really understanding them. Just like one lady told me, my daughter can recite the entire Bhagavad Gita. I said, that's wonderful. I said, now she has to be able to explain each verse. And she was like shocked when I said that. Because it's easier just to repeat something, but it's much more complicated to explain what it means, right? That means that they would have to go back to every verse again and be able to explain each verse.
No, that's a great point, Maharaj. That's exactly where we all, at least so far, failed, because even though they were doing the rituals, they were not able to answer the questions of the next generation, which means that's something is going wrong in whatever they're doing.
Well, something is going wrong. It was the education that went wrong.
Right.
They're putting them in these, Christian schools and this school, that school, and they're learning, all the speculations of the material of the Western world, and then they have questions to ask, and the parents can't answer them. Because they never got taught the philosophy.
True.
They understand the verse. They were taught the mantras, but not the philosophy behind it. Or they have a general idea of it, but when they're challenged by these kids who are being taught in school to question everything. So now they start questioning things that the parents never even thought about questioning. Does God exist, right? It's not a question for the parents because, they all accepted that God exists.
Right.
So now they have to explain how God exists. They were never trained how to do that.
No, that was me. I used to ask questions all the time. So.
Yeah, and then you were not able to get answers all the time. And, you just leave unsettled questions remain in the mind, and that creates doubts.
Thank you, Maharaj.
That's why every day we're going slowly, reading Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, trying to understand who is Krishna. Once we know who Krishna is, then we know who we are. If you don't know who Krishna is, you'll never figure out who you are either. Hari Bol. Oh, goes to Prabhupada. Thank you. Who's going to sing? Sing? Let's sing. Okay, no, she's going to sing. Go ahead. Oh, you want the words? No, she doesn't need it.
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakati Sadma
Shri Guru Charana Padma Kevala Bhakti Sadma
Banto Mui Savdhana Mate
Bando Mui Savadana Mate
Jahara Prasade Bhai E Bhavatoriya Jai
Kanara Prasade Bhai Eva Vatoriya Jai
Krishna Prapti Hoye Jaha Hoye Te
Krishna Prapti Hoya Hoite
Guru Mukh Padma Vakya Chite Te Koriya Ekya
Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chitete Koriya Akya
Hare na kori ho mane asha
Arana Koriya Mane Asa
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Shri Guru Charane Rati Aise Uttama Gati
Je prasade pure sarv asha
Ye prasade pure sarva asa
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
चक्षुदान दिलो जे जन्मे जन्मे प्रभु से
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
दिव्य ज्ञान हृदय प्रकाशितो
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाशा जायते
प्रेम भक्ति जहाँ होते अविद्या विनाश जाते
वेदे गाय जहाँ राचरितो
कृते गणर चरितो
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु अधम जनारा बंधु
श्री गुरु करुणा सिंधु आदान जनार बंधु
लोकनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
लोकेनाथ लोकेरा जीवाना
हाँ हाँ प्रभु करो दया देहो मोरे पद छाया
आहा प्रभु कोर दया देह मोरे पद छाया
हे बेजास खुशुक्ति भुवाना
हे बेयास सुखी भुवाना
शीला प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना
प्रभुपाद पतित पावाना
जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा जय प्रभुपदा शीला प्रभुपदा
जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा जय प्रभुपादा
जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय जय गुरुदेव 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 जय जय गुरुदेव
जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंदा Shri Adaita Gadadhara Shiva Sadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda.
Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Gaur Bhaktavinda.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine.
Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine.
Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravadi Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Pashata Deshatarine.
Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Sunyavadi Paskata Deshatarine.
Srinitaya Gaura Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Srinitaya Gaura Hari Bol.
Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Hari Bol, Nitai Gaura Premanandi Ki Jai. Jai Om Vishnupad Paramahansa Kaviraj Saraswati Shri Shri Shimad. His Divine Grace is Sri Bhaktivedanta Goswami Maharaj Sri Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnavindi Ki Jai. Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Se Ghosh Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Bhakti Radha Sri Vasani Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai. Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Sam Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai. Nitai Gaura Premanande Hari Bol. Namo Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Namaste Saraswati.